I'm about to share something with you that sounds absolutely ridiculous. Something that might make you laugh or think I've lost my mind completely, but I promise you, if you stay with me, if you really listen to what I'm about to tell you, your entire relationship with money is going to change forever, and I mean forever. I discovered something so simple, so almost childishly easy, that when I first heard about it, I dismissed it entirely. I thought it was nonsense. I thought it was one of those silly superstitions that desperate people cling to when they don't understand how the universe really works. But then something happened that I couldn't ignore, something so profound and so undeniable that I had to reconsider everything I thought I knew about prosperity and abundance. There's a specific number, and I want you to listen very carefully to this, a specific number that when you write it down and place it in your wallet, begins to activate something in your consciousness that literally starts pulling money toward you like a magnet. Now, before you roll your eyes, before you click away thinking this is just another gimmick, let me tell you about a woman who came to me 3 years ago. She was at the end of her rope. She had $17 to her name. She was facing eviction. Her children were hungry. She had applied for over 200 jobs and heard nothing but silence or rejection. This woman looked at me with tears streaming down her face and said, "Florence, I've tried everything. I've prayed, I've visualized, I've affirmed. Nothing works. I'm cursed. I'm meant to be poor." I took her hand and I said something that shocked her. I said, "You're not cursed, darling. You're just using the wrong language with the universe." And then I told her exactly what I'm about to tell you. I gave her a specific number to write down, and I made her promise not to tell a single soul about it. Not her sister, not her best friend, not even her children. This had to be a sacred secret between her and the infinite abundance of God. She looked at me like I was crazy, but she was desperate enough to try anything. So she went home, she wrote that number on a small piece of paper, and she tucked it into the fold of her empty wallet. Now, what happened next is why I'm making this video today. Within 48 hours, she received a phone call from a company she had interviewed with 6 months earlier. They said the person they hired didn't work out and they wanted her to start immediately, and the salary was exactly double what the original position had offered. But that's not even the remarkable part. Within the same week, she received a letter in the mail informing her that a distant relative she barely knew had passed away and left her a small inheritance. And then, just when she thought things couldn't get any stranger, her landlord called and said he was reducing her rent because he felt bad about her situation and appreciated that she'd always been honest with him even when she couldn't pay on time. When she came back to see me 2 weeks later, she was shaking. She pulled out her wallet and showed me that number, still tucked safely inside, and she whispered, "Florence, it worked. I don't understand how, but it worked." And that woman today, just 3 years later, she owns her own home. She runs her own business. Her children want for nothing. And she still carries that number in her wallet, and she still hasn't told a soul about it until she gave me permission to share her story with you today, without using her name, of course, because the secrecy is part of what makes this so powerful. Now I'm going to tell you something that might sound utterly mad, but it's the truth, and the truth has a way of being stranger than any fiction we could devise. When you carry something secret, something precious, something that represents a claim you've made on the universe, that secret becomes a seed planted in the dark, rich soil of the invisible. You don't dig it up every day to see if it's growing. You don't parade it around and ask everyone what they think of your seed. You leave it alone. You water it with faith. You protect it from the frost of doubt and the harsh winds of other people's opinions and limitations. Jesus himself said, "When you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen." There's divine instruction in secrecy. There's power in the hidden work, the quiet claim, the silent knowing. I knew a man once who wanted desperately to be a successful inventor. He told everyone about his ideas. He went to parties and talked about what he was going to create. He asked opinions, he sought validation. And do you know what happened? Every single person he told found a reason why it wouldn't work. His brother-in-law knew someone who tried something similar and failed. His neighbor read an article about how the market was saturated. His own mother worried he was wasting his time. Within 6 months, he'd abandoned the whole thing. Not because the idea was bad, not because he lacked talent or resources, but because he'd allowed other people's consciousness, other people's limited thinking, other people's fears to infiltrate the sacred space where his dream was trying to take form. Compare that to Thomas Edison, who worked in relative secrecy, who failed thousands of times, and who didn't announce his intentions to the world until he had something to show for it. He protected his vision the way you'd protect a newborn child, keeping it away from harsh elements until it was strong enough to survive on its own. This is what the woman with the check understood instinctively. She wasn't being superstitious, she was being spiritually intelligent. She knew that her faith was tender, that her belief was still forming, and that the last thing she needed was someone telling her she was being foolish or unrealistic. You see, when you speak your desire aloud to others, you're essentially asking for their agreement, whether you realize it or not. And most people, I'm sorry to say, are not equipped to agree with your highest vision for yourself. They'll agree with what they think is possible based on their own limitations, their own experiences, their own failures and fears. But the universe has no such limitations. The universe doesn't know the word impossible. It only knows laws, immutable spiritual laws that work the same way every single time, regardless of who you are or what you've done or where you came from. Here's another secret about secrets. When you keep your vision to yourself, you conserve your energy. Every time you explain your dream to someone else, you're spending energy. You're defending it, justifying it, trying to make them understand it. And that's energy that could be used to actually manifest the thing itself. I learned this lesson myself years ago when I was first discovering these principles. I was so excited, so on fire with this new understanding, that I wanted to tell everyone. I was like someone who'd discovered a gold mine and couldn't stop talking about it. And what happened? People looked at me like I'd lost my mind. They dismissed me. They patronized me. They smiled politely and changed the subject. It hurt, I won't lie to you. It hurt because I wanted them to see what I was seeing, to feel what I was feeling, to understand that we'd all been living under such unnecessary limitations. But then I realized something profound. Their understanding wasn't necessary for my demonstration, not one bit. The universe didn't need their permission or their agreement. I only needed my own alignment, my own faith, my own willingness to act on what I knew to be true. And here's where so many people get stuck. They think spiritual alignment means waiting, sitting back, hoping, praying that somehow the universe will drop their good into their lap while they continue doing the same things, thinking the same thoughts, living the same patterns. That's not faith, darling. That's fear dressed up in spiritual language. Real faith is action. Real faith moves your feet. Real faith has you speaking differently, choosing differently, showing up differently even before you see the evidence. When I knew that apartment was mine, I didn't just visualize it, I prepared for it. I started packing. I looked at my belongings and decided what would come with me and what I'd leave behind. I walked past that building whenever I could, claiming it in my consciousness, blessing it, thanking it for being my home. People thought I was insane. Florence, you don't even have an appointment to see it. You're acting like you already live there. And I'd smile and say, in consciousness, I already do. Because that's the secret everyone misses. Your outer world is just the reflection of your inner world. By the time something appears in your physical reality, it's already old news. It was created in consciousness first, weeks or months before, by the thoughts you thought, the words you spoke, the feelings you entertained. This is why you can't keep dwelling on what you don't want and expect something different to show up. You can't keep telling the story of your struggle and expect abundance. You can't keep identifying with lack and expect prosperity to find you. Your consciousness is the cause. Your life is the effect. So, when I claimed that apartment in my consciousness, I wasn't being delusional. I was being deliberate. I was impressing my subconscious mind with the pattern I wanted to see manifest. I was aligning my inner reality with my desired outer reality, and the universe, which is nothing but law, had no choice but to respond. Within 3 days, everything shifted. The owner called. The appointment was scheduled. And when I walked through that door, it was exactly as I had seen it, exactly as I had claimed it. Not because I was lucky, not because I was special, but because I understood the law. Your word is your wand, your consciousness is your power. And when you dare to claim your good before you see it, when you dare to act as if it's already done, you activate forces that most people never tap into. This is what I mean when I say that signs follow, they do not precede. You don't wait for permission from your circumstances. You don't wait for everything to line up perfectly. You align yourself first, and then watch your circumstances rearrange themselves to match. But you have to be willing to look foolish. You have to be willing to take the step before the bridge appears. You have to be willing to claim your good in the face of contrary evidence. Most people aren't willing to do that. They want guarantees. They want proof. They want someone else to go first. And that's fine. But those people stay stuck in the same patterns, year after year, wondering why nothing ever changes. The ones who break free? They're the ones who dare to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled before they see it. They're the ones who speak the word of faith even when their bank account says otherwise. They're the ones who act on divine guidance, even when it makes no logical sense. They understand something that most people never grasp. Your external world is absolutely powerless to keep your good from you. The only thing that can block your demonstration is your own consciousness, your own mental acceptance or rejection of your good. I've watched people complain about their circumstances for years, blaming the economy, their boss, their family, the government, and all the while, their words are the very chains that bind them. Every time they say, "I can't afford it," they're decreeing poverty. Every time they say, "Nothing ever works out for me," they're closing the door to their good. Every time they say, "I'm always sick," they're renewing their subscription to illness. Your word is law in your universe. Not sometimes, not when conditions are favorable, always. Every single time you speak, you're either building your kingdom or tearing it down. You're either calling forth your good or pushing it away. And here's what makes it even more powerful. You don't have to convince anyone else of your word. You don't need your mother to believe in your success. You don't need your spouse to agree with your vision. You don't need your friends to validate your dreams. You only need to convince your own subconscious mind. That's your only audience. That's the only consciousness that matters in your demonstration. The woman who desires marriage doesn't need every single man in the world to find her attractive. She only needs to impress upon her subconscious mind that she is divinely irresistible to her right mate. The man who desires prosperity doesn't need the approval of economists. He only needs to accept in his own consciousness that he is a channel for infinite abundance. I knew a woman once who wanted to move to a beautiful home by the sea. Everyone told her it was impossible. She had no money saved. She had no prospects. The real estate market was impossible, but she did something remarkable. Every single day, she would close her eyes and feel the sea breeze on her face. She would hear the waves crashing. She would smell the salt air. She would give thanks for her home by the sea as though it already existed. And she spoke her word. Infinite Spirit, open the way for my immediate demonstration of my perfect home by the sea. I give thanks that it now manifests in perfect ways. 3 months later, a relative she barely knew passed away and left her a cottage by the ocean. Not money to buy one. The actual house, already hers. Deed and all. Now, was that luck? Was that coincidence? No. That was law. That was the Word made flesh. That was consciousness becoming form. You see, the universe is not a democracy where everyone votes on whether you get to have your good. The universe is a monarchy, and you are the sovereign ruler of your own consciousness. What you decree with feeling and faith must come to pass. It's not personal development. It's not positive thinking. It's spiritual law, as reliable as gravity. But most people use this incredible power against themselves. They're hypnotized by appearances. They look at their bank account and decree lack. They look at their body and decree sickness. They look at their relationships and decree loneliness. And then they wonder why their life doesn't change. Your situation cannot change until your words change. Your words cannot change until your thoughts change. And your thoughts cannot change until you take dominion over your consciousness and refuse to accept anything less than your God-given good. This is not about pretending. This is not about denial. This is about knowing the truth that sets you free. The truth is that you are a spiritual being, created in the image and likeness of abundance, health, love, and joy. Anything less than that is the illusion. Your job is to speak the word that dissolves the illusion and reveals the truth. Now, I want to address something that many people struggle with when they first begin to practice affirmations. They feel dishonest. They say, "But Florence, I don't have the money yet. How can I say I'm prosperous when my bank account says otherwise? Isn't that lying?" This is where we must understand the difference between fact and truth. The fact might be that your bank account is low today. But the truth is that you are one with infinite supply, that substance is omnipresent, and that prosperity is your divine birthright. You are not lying when you affirm prosperity. You are stating a spiritual truth that supersedes the temporary fact. Facts are temporary. they shift and change. Truth is eternal. When you affirm the truth, you are not denying the facts, you are refusing to give them power. You are withdrawing your faith from the appearance and placing it where it belongs, in the invisible realm of spirit, where all things are already accomplished. Think of it this way. If a gardener plants a seed, she doesn't stand over the ground and say, "There's nothing here, this is empty soil, I see no plant." No. She waters the ground, she tends it, she expects the harvest. She speaks to that seed with expectation. You are growing, you are strong, you will bear fruit. She is not lying, she is recognizing the potential that is already present in the seed. You are that gardener. Your word is the water, and the seed is the divine idea already planted in your consciousness by God Himself. Now, let's talk about how to craft your affirmations so that they carry the greatest power. First, always speak in the present tense. Do not say, "I will be prosperous." That places your good in the future, always just out of reach. Say instead, "I am prosperous now." This is not wishful thinking, it is recognition of a spiritual truth that exists right now in the invisible. Second, make your affirmations personal and specific. General statements have general power, but when you speak directly to your own life, you activate the law with precision. Instead of saying, "Prosperity comes to people," say, "Prosperity comes to me now, under grace in perfect ways." Third, add the phrase, "under grace in perfect ways." This is essential. It ensures that your demonstration comes through divine timing and divine channels, not through strain, struggle, or harm to anyone. It invites the higher wisdom to orchestrate the details. When you say, "under grace," you are surrendering the how to God and simply claiming the what. I knew a woman who desperately needed housing. She had searched for months and found nothing she could afford. She was about to settle for a damp, dark basement apartment when she came to one of my meetings. I taught her to affirm, "Infinite Spirit, open the way for my right home. I am now living in a beautiful, light-filled space that is perfect for me, under grace, in perfect ways." She resisted at first. "But Florence," she said, "I can't afford a beautiful place." "Shouldn't I be realistic?" I told her. "Your realism is your prison. Speak the word for what is divinely yours, and let God handle the details." She agreed to do it. Every morning and night, she spoke her affirmation with feeling. She pictured herself in a lovely sunlit room. She thanked God in advance. And within 2 weeks, a friend of a friend contacted her out of the blue. A woman was leaving the country for a year and needed someone to house-sit her charming apartment, fully furnished, in a wonderful neighborhood for a fraction of the usual rent. This is what I mean by under grace in perfect ways. The universe has a million doors you cannot see. Your job is not to figure out which door will open. Your job is to speak the word and expect the way to be made clear. And let me tell you something else. When you speak the word, when you plant that seed of faith in the invisible, you must leave it alone. You must let it grow in the dark. This is where most people fail. They plant the seed and then dig it up every 5 minutes to see if anything's happening. Is it working? I don't see anything yet. Maybe I should try something else. Maybe I should worry a little, just in case. No, you water the seed with your faith, and then you walk away with confidence. You go about your day as if it's already done, because in the invisible realm, time's already done. The moment you speak the word with faith, it's set in motion. The universe heard you. Now it's working out the details. I'll give you a simple example from my own life. Years ago, I needed a place to live. I had very little money, and the housing market was impossible. Everyone was competing for the same apartments, and landlords wanted references and deposits I didn't have. I could have spiraled into fear. I could have begged and manipulated and tried to force doors open, but I didn't. I simply said, "Infinite Spirit, open the way for the right home to come to me, under grace in perfect ways." And then, I let it go. I didn't rehearse my problems. I didn't tell every person I met about my housing crisis. I simply held the vision of myself happy and settled in the perfect place. Within a week, a friend mentioned casually that her aunt was looking for someone to house-sit for 6 months, rent-free, in a beautiful neighborhood I could never have afforded. I didn't even know this aunt existed. I wasn't trying to make that connection happen. But the moment I stopped trying to control how times it would happen, the universe brought me the perfect solution through a channel I never would have thought of. That's the magic of under grace in perfect ways. The universe is infinitely more creative than your conscious mind. It sees connections you can't see. It knows people you haven't met yet. It has resources you don't know exist. When you try to figure it all out yourself, you're limiting the solution to what your little human brain can imagine. But when you turn it over to infinite intelligence, you open yourself to miracles beyond your wildest dreams. Now here's the thing, and this is crucial: you must be willing to follow the invisible lead. When that intuition comes, when that hunch arrives, when that coincidence appears, you must times move asterisk. You can't sit there and analyze it to death. You can't say, well, that seems too good to be true, or that's probably not the time's real time's answer. The universe speaks in whispers and signs. It sends you the next step, not the whole staircase. Your job is to take that step without seeing the entire path ahead. This requires courage, this requires trust. This requires you to value the invisible guidance more than the visible circumstances. I knew a man who was praying for the perfect business opportunity. He was specific. He wanted something aligned with his skills, something that would to provide abundantly, something that felt joyful. One day, he was at a coffee shop and overheard two people talking about a project. Something inside him said, speak to them. But his logical mind said, that's weird, they're strangers, you'll look desperate. He almost didn't do it. But he listened to that inner nudge. He introduced himself. Within 15 minutes, they were discussing a partnership. Within 3 months, he had the business he'd been praying for, and it came through a random conversation he almost didn't have. That's how the universe works. It will put the answer right in front of you, but you have to be awake enough to see it and brave enough to act on it. I remember a woman who came to me absolutely drowning in anxiety about her daughter's marriage. Every day, she'd call me with a new worry. What if he's wrong for her? What if they struggle financially? What if? I finally had to stop her and say, do you realize that every time you worry, you're praying for the thing you fear? She looked at me like I'd slapped her. But it's true. Worry is just faith in the negative. It's taking all that creative power you have and aiming it directly at disaster. I gave her a simple assignment. Every time she started to worry about her daughter, she had to immediately say out loud, my daughter is divinely guided. Her marriage is blessed and prospered. All is well. At first she thought it was foolish. The words felt hollow in her mouth. But I told her, say them anyway, your feelings will catch up. And you know what? Within 2 weeks, her whole demeanor changed. She stopped seeing problems everywhere. And interestingly enough, as soon as she stopped projecting disaster onto her daughter's marriage, the daughter started calling her more, sharing good news, seeming happier. The marriage hadn't changed her vision of it had. This is why I'm so insistent that you guard your words like a dragon guards gold. Because your words aren't just the sounds, they're containers of power. They're the molds into which your life force pours itself. When you say, I can't afford it, you're not just stating a fact, you're creating a reality. When you say, nothing ever works out for me, you're giving the universe its marching orders. It listens. It always listens. Now, some of you might be thinking, but Florence, what about being realistic? What about acknowledging problems? And I'll tell you what I tell everyone who asks me that. There's a difference between acknowledging a situation and giving it permanent residence in your consciousness. Yes, perhaps you have debt. Perhaps you're in a difficult relationship. Perhaps your body isn't where you want it to be. I'm not asking you to deny what's in front of you. I'm asking you to stop declaring it as your final reality. Instead of saying, I'm broke, try saying, I'm in the process of demonstrating abundant prosperity. Instead of saying, I'm so sick, say, I'm healing more every day. Perfect health is my divine right. Do you feel the difference? One statement locks the door. The other one leaves it wide open for something new to walk through. I once worked with a man who had been trying to sell his house for over a year. He dropped the price 3 times. He was bitter about it, talking constantly about the terrible market and how no one's buying. Every conversation was a litany of complaints. I said to him, as long as you keep declaring this house unsellable, it will be. You're putting a curse on your own property. He didn't like hearing that, but he was desperate enough to listen. I told him to bless the house every morning. To say, the right buyer is coming. This house is sold to the perfect person at the perfect price. I told him to visualize handing over the keys with joy, to feel gratitude as though the sale had already happened. He thought I'd lost my mind, but he did it anyway. Every morning, walked through that house blessing it. 3 weeks later, 3 weeks after a year of nothing, he got an offer. Not just any offer, but one above his original asking price from a family who fell in love with the house the moment they walked in. They said they'd been looking for months, and this was exactly what they'd been praying for. You see, while he'd been cursing his house, someone else had been blessing the idea of finding it. Once he changed his tune, their energies could finally meet. You can't attract what you're silently condemning. Your words and your wishes must walk together, hand in hand. I once counseled a woman who couldn't understand why her friendships always soured. She'd come to me in tears, saying she wanted deep, lasting connections, yet every conversation I witnessed her have was peppered with little jabs. "Oh, you know how women are," she'd say with a knowing laugh. "They always stab you in the back eventually. Can you see what she was doing? She was blessing betrayal before breakfast. She was naming her friends traitors before they'd even had a chance to prove themselves allies. And the universe, that faithful servant, simply said, 'Your word is law,' and delivered exactly what she'd ordered. When I showed her this pattern, she was genuinely shocked. She thought she'd been protecting herself, building walls against inevitable hurt. But protection and prophecy are not the same thing. One guards against possibility, the other guarantees it. We changed her script entirely. Instead of 'women are backstabbers,' she began affirming, 'I am surrounded by loyal, loving friends who celebrate my success.' It felt awkward in her mouth at first, like shoes on the wrong feet. But she persisted. And within 3 months, not only had her existing friendships deepened remarkably, but she'd attracted 2 new friends who have remained faithful companions to this day. The word you speak creates the world you see. Now, here's where it gets particularly interesting and where most people trip themselves up without even realizing it. There's a tremendous difference between speaking what you want and speaking times about times what you want. Listen closely, because this distinction will change everything. When you say, "I want abundance," you're actually affirming the state of wanting. Want implies lack. Want means, "I don't have." So every time you declare what you want, you're reinforcing the very condition you're trying to escape. Do you see the trap? It's devilishly subtle. The universe doesn't hear your wishful thinking. It hears your declaration of truth. When you say, "I want money," the universe registers. This person identifies as someone who lacks money and faithfully maintains that identity for you. You've just ordered more lack with a side of longing. But when you say, "I give thanks for my immediate, perfect, and permanent supply," you're speaking from the place of having. You're not reporting an absence, you're claiming a presence. You're not describing a future hope, you're declaring a present fact. This is why Jesus constantly told people, "It is done." Not "it will be done" or "I hope it works out for you." He spoke from the end. He called things that were not as though they already were, and in that speaking, they became. I had a student once, a struggling artist who would sit in her cold studio and say, "I want to sell my paintings. I want to sell my paintings." Day after day, this was her prayer. And day after day, the paintings gathered dust. When she came to me, exhausted and discouraged, I asked her to try something different. Instead of wanting, I told her to affirm, "There is a perfect, immediate, and divine buyer for every painting I create. My art finds its perfect home and brings joy to those who receive it. I give thanks that my work is valued and I am abundantly compensated." She looked at me as though I'd suggested she sprout wings and fly. "But it isn't true," she protested. "No one's buying anything and they won't," I replied, "until you stop announcing that fact to the universe every single day." It took courage for her to make the shift. It felt like lying at first, claiming something that wasn't yet visible. But faith is evidence of things not seen, remember? She persisted in her new affirmation, speaking it every morning before she touched brush to canvas. 3 weeks later, a gallery owner walked past her studio, saw her work through the window, and came in. By the end of that meeting, not only had she sold 6 paintings, but she'd secured a spot in the gallery's upcoming show. The demonstration came not because she forced it, but because she had finally aligned herself with the truth of her being. She had moved from the consciousness of lack to the consciousness of abundance, and the outer circumstances rearranged themselves accordingly. You see, most people approach their financial demonstrations from the wrong end entirely. They say, "When the money comes, then I'll feel abundant. When the gallery accepts me, then I'll feel worthy. When the client pays me, then I'll believe I'm valuable." But this is working backwards against the law. The feeling must come first, for feeling is the fertile soil in which all manifestation takes root. I remember working with a businessman who had built his company through sheer force of will and anxiety. He would stay awake nights worrying about cash flow, checking his accounts obsessively, always convinced that disaster lurked around the next corner. And indeed, his business reflected this consciousness. It survived, but barely. There was always just enough, never abundance, never ease. He attracted clients who haggled over every penny, partners who tried to cheat him, employees who stole from him. When he came to me exhausted and desperate, I gave him a simple assignment. Every morning, he was to sit in his office before anyone else arrived, close his eyes, and truly feel in his body what it would be like to have more than enough. Not to think about it or visualize it, but to feel the relief, the ease, the joy of absolute financial security. But that feels like lying, he protested. I'm in debt. My feelings would be false. I said to him, what I say to you now, your current circumstances are the result of your past consciousness. They are yesterday's news made visible. When you change your consciousness today, you are planting the seeds for tomorrow's harvest. There is nothing false about claiming the truth of your divine abundance, even when the bank account hasn't caught up yet. He committed to the practice. Every morning, 20 minutes of pure feeling, he would sit in his chair and breathe into the sensation of security, of knowing that divine supply was infinite and already his. At first, his mind fought him constantly, bringing up bills and problems and fears. But he persisted, gently returning to the feeling again and again. Within 2 months, something extraordinary happened. Not only did 3 new clients appear substantial clients who paid without negotiation, but his entire business atmosphere changed. The difficult clients either left or became reasonable. The suspicious partners became trustworthy. The employees became loyal and honest. He hadn't changed anything about his business practices or strategies. He had simply changed his consciousness, and everything external shifted to match. This is the secret that successful people know, whether they realize it consciously or not. They feel successful before the evidence arrives. They feel wealthy before the bank account reflects it. They feel worthy before the world acknowledges it. And because they hold that feeling steadily, the universe must deliver circumstances to match. But here's where most people stumble. They practice their new consciousness for a day, perhaps a week, and when immediate results don't appear, they say, "You see? It doesn't work." And they slip right back into the old familiar feeling of lack and limitation. I tell my students, spiritual law works with the same consistency as physical law. If you plant a seed in your garden, do you dig it up the next day to see if it's growing? Of course not. You water it, you give it sunlight, you trust the process. Some seeds sprout in days, others take weeks, but all seeds that are given the right conditions must eventually grow. Your consciousness is the seed, your feeling is the water and sunlight, and your demonstrations are the inevitable harvest. The law of manifestation doesn't discriminate. It doesn't ask about your past, your education, your failures, or your circumstances. It simply responds to the mental equivalent you're holding. I've seen people with every material advantage fail spectacularly because they carried poverty consciousness in magnificent homes. And I've seen people start with nothing and create abundance beyond measure because they refuse to accept limitation as their truth. What does this mean for you? It means that wherever you are right now is simply the outpicturing of where your consciousness has been. Not where it is going. Not what you're capable of. Just where it has been dwelling. And the glorious news is that consciousness can be changed in an instant. You don't have to wait years or decades. The moment you shift your inner conviction, you plant a new seed that must eventually demonstrate in your outer world. Let me tell you about a woman who came to me drowning in debt. Bill collectors were calling daily. She had lost her home and was living in a single room, certain that poverty was her permanent condition. Her words were filled with lack. I never have enough. Money slips through my fingers. I'm not meant to prosper. Every statement was an affirmation of limitation. I asked her to do something radical. For 30 days, speak only words of abundance. Refuse to discuss her debt, her lack, her limitations. Instead, affirm constantly. Infinite supply flows to me. Freely. I am a channel of abundance. Every financial need is met before I even ask. At first, she thought this was madness. How could words change her bank account? But she trusted the law enough to try. The first week, nothing visible changed. The second week, she received an unexpected check from an old insurance policy she'd forgotten about. The third week, a A former employer contacted her with freelance work at double her old rate. By the end of 30 days, she had received enough to cover her immediate debts, and more importantly, her entire countenance had transformed. She moved differently, spoke differently, expected differently. 6 months later, she was more financially secure than she'd ever been. The outer change followed the inner transformation exactly. This is the law in action. Your word is your wand. Every statement you make is a command to the universal mind. When you say, "I can't afford it," you instruct the universe in limitation. When you say, "Money comes to me easily and frequently," you open channels for supply. The universe doesn't argue with you. It simply says yes to whatever mental equivalent you're holding and speaking. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. What about positive thinking that doesn't work? What about affirmations that seem to go nowhere? Here's the truth. Affirmations that contradict your deep belief system create inner conflict, not manifestation. If you're saying "I am wealthy" while your entire being rejects this as false, you're simply creating noise, not change. True affirmation comes from a place of conviction, not desperation. The difference is feeling. An affirmation spoken with doubt is just words. An affirmation spoken with absolute conviction, with the feeling of already having what you declare, carries creative power. This is why I teach you to affirm from the place of already having received. Not "I will be prosperous someday," but "I am prosperous now." Not "I hope to be healed," but "I am already healed in divine mind, and I now accept this healing in my body." Feel the difference? One is begging. The other is claiming your inheritance. I've watched people pray for money while wearing the consciousness of poverty like a coat they refuse to remove. They say the words, but their vibration screams lack. They affirm abundance while checking their bank account 20 times a day in fear. You cannot fool the law. You cannot trick the universe. Your dominant feeling always wins. Let me give you something practical. Something you can use today. Before you speak your word, check your atmosphere. What are you feeling? What's the weather inside your consciousness? If there's desperation, stop. Don't speak yet. Desperation is quicksand. The more you struggle, the deeper you sink. Instead, move into gratitude. Find anything, even the smallest thing, and genuinely appreciate it. The sun on your face, the breath in your lungs, the fact that your heart beats without your effort. Gratitude shifts your frequency faster than anything else I know. Once you feel the shift, and you will feel it, like coming up from underwater, then speak your word, not with force, not with pleading, but with calm authority. The perfect opportunity is mine now. My supply is endless and immediate. Every need is met before I even ask. Notice something? There's no explanation to God about how bad things are. There's no backstory, just the claim. When a prince enters his father's castle, he doesn't explain why he deserves to be there. He belongs. You are treating with the divine as royalty treats with royalty, because you are. Now here's where most people stumble. They speak the word, feel good for about 3 minutes, then spend the next 23 hours and 57 minutes contradicting everything they just claimed. They affirm abundance at breakfast and complain about bills at lunch. They declare perfect health in the morning and recite their symptoms to everyone by afternoon. They claim their soulmate exists and then spend the evening telling their friend how all the good ones are taken. Your word must be guarded like a seed in soil. You don't dig up a seed every 5 minutes to see if it's growing. You trust the process. You protect it from the birds of doubt and the weeds of contradiction. This means watching what you say after you've spoken your word. I'm not talking about pretending everything is fine when it isn't. I'm talking about not energizing the problem anymore. There's a difference between acknowledging a situation and wedding yourself to it. You can know bills exist without making them your meditation. You can be aware of a health challenge without rehearsing it in every conversation. Where your attention goes, your energy flows. And where your energy flows, manifestation grows. Let me tell you about a woman who came to me drowning in debt. Every conversation began with her financial woes. She had turned poverty into her identity. It was her story, her excuse, her conversation starter. I told her, for 30 days, you will not mention debt to another soul, not once. You will only speak of abundance or nothing at all. She looked at me like I'd asked her to fly. But it's the truth, she protested. No, I said, it's the current fact. Truth is what God says about you, and God says you are abundantly supplied. Which will you give your voice to? She agreed, though reluctantly. The first week nearly killed her. She had to bite her tongue constantly. Her entire social life had been built on commiserating about money. But something happened. By week 2, she noticed opportunities she'd been walking past for years. A side job, a refund she'd forgotten about, a friend offering exactly what she needed. By week 3, the shift was undeniable. Not because circumstances magically changed, but because she stopped being a vibrational match to lack. She started receiving differently. That's the key word. Receiving. Not chasing, not controlling, not manipulating. She opened her hands and her heart, and life responded with a completely different offering. And this is where most people misunderstand manifestation. They think it's about adding more desire, more wanting, more intensity to their asking. But true manifestation is about subtraction. It's about removing the blocks, the resistance, the tight grip of fear that says, I must make this happen or I'll die. You don't manifest by wanting harder. You manifest by relaxing deeper. I've watched this pattern repeat itself in countless lives. A woman desperate for a relationship spends years chasing, performing, shrinking herself to fit what she thinks will attract love. Nothing works. Then one day, exhausted from the chase, she surrenders. She says, I'm done. I'm going to focus on myself, on my own joy, on my own fullness. And within months, sometimes weeks, love appears. Not because she stopped wanting it, but because she stopped needing it to prove her worthiness. The universe doesn't respond to desperation, it responds to alignment. When you're in lack consciousness, you're broadcasting a signal that says, I don't have. And the universe, being the perfect mirror that it is, reflects that back to you with more experiences of not having. But when you shift into abundance consciousness, when you genuinely feel grateful, complete, and trusting, you broadcast, I have. And life mirrors that back with more to have, more to receive, more to celebrate. This is why affirmations fail for so many people. They stand in front of the mirror, debt collectors calling, stomach tight with anxiety, and repeat, I am wealthy, I am prosperous, while every cell in their body screams the opposite. The words mean nothing if the feeling doesn't match. You can't lie to your subconscious mind. It knows what you really believe. What works is this: find the feeling first. Find any thought, any memory, any possibility that generates even the smallest spark of relief, of hope, of peace. Maybe you can't believe you're a millionaire, but can you believe that the universe has always provided what you truly needed? Can you remember a time when things worked out, even if not how you expected? Can you appreciate the roof over your head right now, the food in your pantry, the breath in your lungs? Start there. Start with what feels true, what opens your chest rather than tightens it. Because that opening, that softening, that tiny shift from contraction to expansion, that's where the magic lives. I once counseled a man who'd been trying to manifest a business success for 3 years. He'd done everything right according to the books, vision boards, affirmations, visualization, nothing. When he came to me, he was bitter, frustrated, ready to give up on the whole thing. I asked him one question. When you visualize your success, how does it feel? He paused. Then admitted, honestly, it feels stressful. Because I'm thinking about all the work it will take, all the ways it could fail, all the people I'll disappoint if it doesn't happen. There's your answer. He wasn't visualizing from fulfillment, he was visualizing from fear. His so-called manifestation practice was actually reinforcing the very lack he was trying to escape. We worked together to shift his approach. Instead of forcing himself to envision specific outcomes, he began practicing the feeling of being supported, the feeling of trusting his own abilities, the feeling of enjoying his work regardless of results. He stopped measuring his worthiness by external achievements and started acknowledging the value he already brought to every interaction. Within 6 months, his business tripled. Not because the strategy changed, but because he changed. He became someone who expected good things, who trusted his own capacity, who operated from fullness rather than fear. And that's when the universe had room to deliver what had deal. He's been waiting all along. The spiritual law doesn't care how desperately you need something. It cares about what you habitually expect. I watched a woman beg for partnership for years. Prayers, affirmations, visualizations, the whole arsenal. Nothing. Then she stopped trying to get a relationship and started living as though she was already cherished. She bought herself flowers. She made Friday nights special. She stopped treating her life like a waiting room and started treating it like the main event. Within 3 months, she met someone. Not because the universe finally heard her, but because she finally stopped broadcasting scarcity. She stopped being a vibrational match for "I am incomplete." She became a match for "I am whole, and love is natural to me." This is what most people miss. They think spiritual law is about asking prettily enough, about finding the right words or the perfect technique. They don't realize they're asking from a consciousness of lack, which only produces more lack. It's like trying to fill a cup with a hole in the bottom. You can pour all day, but until you address the hole, nothing stays. The hole is your underlying belief. The hole is the story you tell yourself when nobody's listening. The hole is that quiet voice that says, "Things like that don't happen to people like me." And until you mend that hole, until you genuinely shift that belief, the universe can't fill your cup. Not because it's withholding, but because you're literally unable to hold what you're asking for. I knew a man who inherited a significant sum of money. He'd been broke his whole life, always complaining about never having enough. Within 18 months, every penny was gone. Not through tragedy or bad luck, but through 1,000 small decisions that perfectly matched his consciousness of poverty. He didn't believe he deserved wealth, so wealth couldn't stay with him. The universe delivered exactly what he expected: temporary relief followed by inevitable loss. This is why I keep saying your consciousness is your fortune, not your wishes, not your hopes, your actual operating belief system. What you expect when you're not actively trying to manifest anything, that's the signal the universe responds to. And here's what makes this challenging. Most people don't know what they actually believe. They think they believe in abundance because they say affirmations and read inspirational books. But their actions tell a different story. Their panic when the bills come tells a different story. Their envy when someone else succeeds tells a different story. Your real beliefs are revealed in moments of pressure. When something goes wrong, what's your first thought? When opportunity knocks, do you instinctively trust it or suspect it? When you see someone with what you want, do you feel inspired or threatened? Those reactions, those immediate, unguarded responses, that's your actual consciousness. That's what's creating your reality. The good news is that consciousness can be changed. But it requires more than positive thinking. It requires a complete overhaul of your inner dialogue, your assumptions, your default settings. It requires you to catch yourself in the lie and choose the truth instead. Every single time. When the thought comes, "I can't afford this," you stop and choose differently. Not by denying practical reality, but by refusing to make a permanent identity out of temporary circumstances. You say, "I'm in the process of affording this," or "resources are on their way to me," or simply, "This situation is temporary." This isn't positive thinking plastered over a dire situation. It's a refusal to worship at the altar of appearances. It's a recognition that your word has power, and when you speak as though limitation is your permanent address, you're signing a long-term lease with poverty. I've watched people transform their entire financial reality simply by changing the conversation they have with themselves. Not by pretending money was there when it wasn't, but by stopping the constant repetition of lack as identity. Instead of "I'm broke," they learned to say, "I'm currently reorganizing my resources." Instead of "I'll never get ahead," they practiced "I'm building momentum." The difference might seem cosmetic, but it's architectural. One set of statements builds a prison, the other builds a bridge. And here's what happens when you make this shift consistently. You start noticing opportunities you would have missed before. Because your mind isn't constantly scanning for evidence of your limitations, it begins scanning for possibilities instead. The reticular activating system in your brain, that incredible filter that decides what's important enough for your conscious attention, gets reprogrammed from a lack detector to an opportunity detector. Someone mentions a side project, and instead of thinking, "I don't have time," you wonder, "Could this be a door opening?" You see an advertisement for something you want, and instead of the immediate shutdown of "I can't afford it," you ask, "How could I make this possible?" The shift in question changes everything. This is the practical magic of treated thoughts. You're not waiting for the universe to drop solutions in your lap. You're becoming the kind of person who sees solutions that were invisible to you before. Now, let's address the elephant that's probably sitting in your mental room right now. But what if I need to make a decision today? What if I can't just wait around for my thoughts to magically manifest money? Here's the truth that reconciles spiritual principle with practical reality. Treating your thoughts doesn't mean you become passive. It means you become strategic. It means you make today's necessary decision from a foundation of inner abundance rather than inner panic. If you need to choose between two job offers, you don't paralyze yourself waiting for a cosmic sign. You make the best choice available while maintaining an inner conversation that says, better is always coming. This decision is a stepping stone, not a ceiling. If you need to cut expenses, you do it wisely while affirming, this is temporary adjustment, not permanent defeat. I'm making space for increase. The treatment happens in the emotional energy you bring to the practical action. Two people can make identical decisions, identical budgets, identical sacrifices, but one makes them from a vibration of defeat, and one makes them from a vibration of temporary strategy. The person operating from strategy will see the way out. The person operating from defeat will only see the walls. This is why your internal narrative matters more than almost anything else in your financial life. Because that narrative determines what you notice, what you attempt, what you accept, and what you refuse. I knew someone who lost a job and had 2 months of savings. The old pattern would have been panic, desperation, taking the first offer out of fear. Instead, she treated every anxious thought that arose. She made a budget, yes. She applied for jobs strategically, yes. But internally, she kept redirecting her mind. I'm being guided to the right opportunity. Something better than before is finding me. She didn't get lazy. She worked harder than ever on her applications and networking. But she worked from faith rather than fear, and that changes everything about how you show up. She ended up in a position that paid 40% more than the job she'd lost, with better conditions and growth potential. Was it the affirmations alone? Of course not. It was the affirmations keeping her mind clear enough to recognize the opportunity, confident enough to negotiate well, and energized enough to make a powerful impression. The treatment of her thoughts created the internal conditions for external success. She became the match for the opportunity that was already seeking her. That's the critical distinction most people miss. They think the affirmation creates something from nothing, when actually it removes the mental blocks preventing them from receiving what life is already trying to give them. I once counseled a man whose entire business had collapsed. He'd lost everything, his company, his savings, even his home. When he came to me, he was drowning in shame and self-condemnation. Every thought was a rehearsal of his failures. I ruined everything. I'm a complete failure. I'll never recover from this. Now, I could have told him to affirm, I am a millionaire, or money flows to me effortlessly, and trust me, that's what he expected. But here's what I understood that he didn't yet. His consciousness was so saturated with failure vibration that any affirmation about success would bounce right off. It would feel like a lie, and his subconscious would reject it entirely. So instead, I gave him something much simpler, something his consciousness could actually accept. I learn quickly and apply wisdom to every situation. That's it. Nothing about money or success or redemption, just learning and wisdom. He looked at me like I was missing the point. But I need money, he said. I need to rebuild my life. And you will, I told him. But right now, your consciousness is locked in a pattern of self-punishment. We're not trying to leap from total defeat to complete triumph in one jump. We're building a bridge, one plank at a time. First, we shift you from I'm a failure to I'm learning. Can you feel the difference in those statements? He could. One felt like a prison sentence. The other felt like possibility. Within 2 weeks of steady repetition, morning, noon, night, and especially whenever the old self-condemnation started creeping back, something shifted. He attended a dinner party he'd almost canceled because he was too ashamed to face people who knew about his bankruptcy. But because his mind was no longer looping in failure patterns, he was actually present at that dinner. Actually listening. Actually engaging. Someone mentioned a problem their company was facing. The old version of him would have stayed silent, convinced he had nothing valuable to offer. But his affirmation had opened a tiny crack in his consciousness. I learn quickly and apply wisdom. So when an insight came to him, he shared it. That conversation led to a consulting contract. Not a fortune, just enough to start rebuilding. But here's the miracle. He recognized the opportunity because his mind was finally clear enough to see it, and he had the confidence to speak up because his internal dialogue was no longer telling him he was worthless. 6 months later, his consulting practice was thriving beyond what his old business had ever achieved. Same man, same intelligence, same skills, but completely different internal conditions. The affirmation didn't magically create the opportunities, they were always there. People always needed the expertise he possessed. But his consciousness had been too cluttered with self-hatred to recognize or respond to them. This is what I mean when I say affirmations work from the inside out. You're not trying to manipulate external reality through magical thinking. You're clearing the static from your internal radio so you can finally tune into the frequency where your good is already broadcasting. Think of it like this. Imagine you're trying to fill a cup, but your hand is clenched in a tight fist. No matter how much water is available, none of it can enter. Your fist isn't preventing water from existing, there's an entire ocean of it. Your fist is just preventing you from receiving it. An affirmation is the gentle instruction to your hand. Open, release, receive. The hand that refuses to open becomes a fist, and a fist can hold nothing new. I once knew a woman who clutched her affirmations like weapons. She would say, "I am abundant," through gritted teeth, her jaw tight, her shoulders hunched, as though preparing for battle. She wondered why nothing changed. I said to her gently, "My dear, you're affirming prosperity while wearing the armor of poverty consciousness." She looked at me, confused. "Notice," I said, "how you hold your body when you speak these words. You're braced for disappointment. You're protecting yourself from hope. The words are right, but the spirit beneath them is still afraid." An affirmation spoken in fear is like planting seeds while simultaneously pouring salt on the soil. This is why your times feeling state times matters more than your vocabulary. You can say, "I am at peace" 1,000 times, but if your nervous system is vibrating at the frequency of anxiety, the universe responds to the vibration, not the words. Think of it this way. If you're trying to tune into a radio station, you must match the frequency. You can't dial into 98.5 while insisting you want to hear the program on 101.3. The universe operates on the same principle. It doesn't hear your words, it feels your frequency. So before you speak your affirmation, take a moment to times become times what you're affirming. If you're affirming peace, breathe peace into your body first. Soften your jaw, drop your shoulders. Let your spine lengthen, then times speak the words. If you're affirming abundance, imagine just for a moment what it would feel like if you already had what you desire. Not the things themselves, but the times feeling, times of having them. The security, the ease, the lightness. Let that feeling fill you like water filling a vessel. Then times speak your affirmation from that fullness. This is not pretending. This is tuning the instrument before you play. And here's what I've observed over years of this work. The more you practice feeling the frequency of your desire before you speak your affirmation, the less desperate the affirmation becomes. It transforms from begging into stating fact. From future tense into present reality. "I will be prosperous" becomes "I am prospered." "I hope to be healed" becomes "I am whole." Can you feel the difference? The first is reaching across an imagined gap. The second is standing firmly on ground you've claimed. Now, I know what happens next. You practice this for a few days, and the old thoughts come rushing back like water returning to a drained pool. The doubt. The "yes but." The voice that says, "Who are you kidding? Look at your bank account. Look at your circumstances." This is where most people abandon the work. They think it's not working, and they return to their old mental habits like a dog returning to its vomit. Excuse my frankness, but it's true. What they don't understand is this. There is always times a lag between thought and manifestation. You plant a seed in the ground, and for weeks you see nothing. Does that mean the seed isn't working? No. It means the work is happening beneath the surface, in the darkness, where you cannot see it. Your affirmations are seeds. When you speak them, truly speak them, with feeling and faith, they descend into the subconscious soil and begin their quiet work. But if you dig them up every day to check on their progress, you kill them. This is why persistence matters. Not desperate, white-knuckled clinging, but gentle, consistent return. Say your affirmation once with feeling, and you've planted a seed. Say it daily for a month, and you've watered the garden. Say it for 3 months, and you'll see the first green shoots breaking through the soil. But you must not waver. You must not look at your current circumstances and let them convince you that nothing is happening. Your circumstances are old news. They're last month's thinking made visible. They're the lag, not the truth. Your current reality is just the echo of who you used to be. And if you keep reacting to the echo, you keep the old music playing. But when you shift your attention to the invisible realm, to what you're claiming in faith, you starve the old pattern and feed the new one. This is where people get it backwards. They think they'll believe it when they see it, but the spiritual law is the exact opposite. You'll see it when you believe it. Your belief is the bridge. Your faith is the ferry. Your inner conviction is the passport that lets the invisible cross over into the visible world. And this is why I tell you to live from the end result, not toward it. Asterisk, from times it. Don't live like someone whose times trying times to be prosperous. Live like someone who times is times prosperous. Don't live like someone whose times hoping times to be loved. Live like someone who times is times loved. Don't live like someone whose times waiting times for the miracle. Live like someone who's already received it, because the spiritual realm doesn't respond to your effort, it responds to your assumption. Let me give you an example. I knew a woman who desperately wanted to get married. She'd been single for years, and she was lonely, anxious, convinced that love had passed her by. She tried everything, dating services, makeovers, affirmations, nothing worked. Because underneath all the trying, she was still living from the vibration of lack. Then one day, she decided to stop trying. Instead, she started living times as if she were already happily married. She bought herself flowers. She set the table for two. She made space in her closet. She spoke to herself the way a loving partner would speak to her. She wasn't pretending. She was practicing asterisk. She was training her consciousness to match the reality she desired. And within 3 months, she met the man who became her husband. Now, was that magic? No, it was law. She shifted her inner state, and her outer world rearranged itself to match. This is what the Bible means when it says, faith is the substance of things hoped for. Substance, not wishful thinking. Not fantasy. Asterisk, substance. Asterisk, your faith is the raw material out of which your reality is built. And when you live from the end result, you're not denying the circumstances, you're just refusing to let them have the final word. You're saying, yes, this is what's visible right now, but I answer to a higher authority. I answer to the law of faith. And that law says I can have what I claim with steady, expectant trust. Here's another way to think about it. Your subconscious mind is like a garden. Whatever you plant, it will grow. If you plant seeds of worry, you'll harvest anxiety. If you plant seeds of resentment, you'll harvest bitterness. If you plant seeds of faith, you'll harvest miracles. But here's the thing. The garden doesn't care what you plant. It just grows what you give it. It doesn't judge. It doesn't question. It just says, oh, you keep thinking about failure? Okay, here's some failure. Oh, you keep imagining abundance? Okay, here's some abundance. Your subconscious is neutral. It's the soil. You're the gardener. And most people are walking around wondering why their garden is full of weeds when they've been planting weed seeds every single day through their thoughts, their words, their focus. You've got to become a conscious gardener. You've got to guard your mental garden like your life depends on it, because it does. Every thought is a seed. Every word is a seed. Every image you dwell on is a seed. And you can't afford to be careless anymore. This is your life. This is your one precious incarnation. And you're standing in a garden with infinite potential, holding a bag of seeds, and the question is, what are you planting today? Because I can promise you this, the universe doesn't care about your excuses. It doesn't care that you're tired or scared or that you've failed before. The universe only responds to what you're putting out right now, in this very moment. You want to know why some people seem to glide through life while you're struggling? It's not because they're luckier, or more talented, or more deserving. It's because they learned this one simple truth. Asterisk, you become what you think about most of the time. Asterisk. I've seen people turn their entire lives around not by changing their circumstances, but by changing their inner conversations. I knew a woman who was drowning in debt, absolutely drowning, bill collectors calling day and night, and instead of declaring bankruptcy, instead of spiraling into panic, she started a new practice. Every single day, she would sit quietly and say, I am a child of the universe. Abundance is my natural state. Money flows to me easily and joyfully. Now, I'm not saying the bills magically disappeared overnight, but within 3 months, she got a job offer that doubled her income. Within 6 months, an old friend repaid a loan she'd completely forgotten about. Within a year, she was completely debt-free. Was it magic? No, it was the law in action. She changed her vibration, and the universe had times to respond. You see, when you truly understand this law, when you truly times it deep in your bones, you stop being a victim of life. You stop waiting for permission. You stop looking for someone to save you. You realize, I am the creator. I am the artist. I am the one holding the paintbrush, and this canvas of my life is blank, and I can paint anything I want on it. But here's where people get tripped up. They think that means they have to force and push and manipulate and control. They think it means gritting their teeth and white-knuckling their way to success. And that's not it at all. True manifestation, true creation comes from a place of joy and ease. It comes from alignment. When you're aligned with your highest good, when you're tuned to the frequency of love and abundance and gratitude, things flow to you. Doors open. People appear. Opportunities arise that you couldn't have planned if you'd spent 100 years strategizing. I've watched this happen over and over again. Someone decides to stop forcing and start flowing. They let go of how it has to happen. They release their death grip on control, and suddenly, everything they've been chasing starts chasing them. This is the paradox. You have to care deeply about your desires while simultaneously being completely detached from the outcome. You have to plant your seeds with intention and then trust the soil to do its work. You can't dig up the garden every day to check if the roots are growing. And this, my friend, is where faith comes in. Not blind faith, not naive hope, but time's knowing asterisk. The kind of bone-deep certainty that what you've asked for is already yours in the invisible, and it's only a matter of time before it manifests in the visible. This is the faith that moves mountains. This is the faith that parts seas. This is the faith that turns water into wine and brings the dead back to life, not in some mystical, unattainable way, but right here, right now, in your actual everyday existence. Because here's what I've learned. The divine doesn't operate on your timetable. It operates on divine timing, which is always perfect, always precise, always exactly when it needs to be. You might be praying for something to happen next Tuesday, but the universe has scheduled it for 3 months from Thursday, because that's when all the pieces will align, that's when you'll be ready, that's when the miracle can actually take root and flourish in your life. I've watched people give up one day before their breakthrough. I've seen them turn back when they were standing right at the threshold of their miracle. They were so close, so incredibly close, but they couldn't hold the vision just one more day. They let impatience override their faith. They let what they could see with their physical eyes cancel out what they'd been holding in their mind's eye. Don't be that person. Don't be the one who plants the seed, waters it faithfully for 99 days, and then digs it up on the 100th day to see why it hasn't sprouted yet. Your constant digging, your constant checking, your constant doubting, that's what's preventing the manifestation. The seed needs the darkness of the earth to germinate. Your desire needs the darkness of the unseen to take form. This is where your spiritual practice becomes absolutely crucial. This is where you need prayer, meditation, affirmations, visualization, not as wishful thinking, but as disciplined mental training. You're training your mind to stay focused on the invisible reality until it becomes visible. You're training your consciousness to hold steady at a higher frequency, even when everything around you is vibrating at a lower one. Think of yourself as a radio. You can't pick up the symphony if you're tuned to static. You have to adjust your dial, your frequency, your vibration to match what you want to receive. And you have to hold that frequency. Not just for 5 minutes during meditation, but as much as possible throughout your day. When you wake up, tune to gratitude. When you encounter challenges, tune to faith. When you go to sleep, tune to expectancy. I knew a woman who wanted to heal a relationship with her daughter. They hadn't spoken in 5 years. 5 years of silence, resentment, hurt feelings, and pride. She came to me and said, "Florence, I don't even know if this is possible. Too much has happened. Too much has been said." I told her what I'm telling you now. Nothing is impossible with God. But you have to do your part. Your part isn't to force your daughter to call you. Your part isn't to manipulate the situation. Your part is to change your consciousness about the relationship. See it healed in your mind first. Talk to your daughter in your mind with love. Forgive in your mind. Ask for forgiveness in your mind. Build the bridge in consciousness before you try to build it in the physical world. She did exactly that. Every single day, she would sit quietly and have a loving conversation with her daughter in her imagination. She would see them laughing together, hugging, sharing meals. She stopped rehearsing the old hurts and started practicing the new reality. She held this vision for 3 months without a single sign that anything was changing in the physical world. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, her daughter called. Out of the blue. Said she'd been thinking about her mother, missed her, wanted to talk. Within 6 months, they'd completely reconciled. The relationship was healed, not just patched up, but truly transformed into something deeper and more beautiful than it had ever been before. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. But Florence, what if I've been affirming for weeks, or even months, and I still don't see results? What if nothing seems to be changing? This is where most people give up. They're standing right at the edge of their demonstration, and they turn around and walk away. Let me tell you something about the invisible world. Just because you can't see something happening doesn't mean nothing is happening. When you plant a seed in the ground, you don't dig it up every day to check if it's growing, do you? Of course not. You trust the process. You water it, you give it sunlight, and you know with absolute certainty that something is happening beneath the surface. Your word is working the same way. Every time you speak your affirmation, every time you hold to your vision, you are rearranging the substance of the invisible world. You are setting forces in motion that must eventually take form in your visible experience. I had a student once who was affirming for the perfect home. She had a very clear picture of what she wanted, a little house with a garden, lots of light, in a quiet neighborhood she could afford. She affirmed every day, "Infinite intelligence leads me to my right home," or "My right home is now revealed to me, under grace, in a perfect way." Weeks went by, nothing. She'd look at listings, but nothing felt right. Months went by. She started to get discouraged. She came to me and said, "Florence, I don't think this is working. Maybe I'm asking for too much." I said to her, "The moment you doubt is the moment you block your demonstration. Your work is to remain steadfast. The universe is saying yes to you, but you must continue to say yes back." She kept on. And then, out of nowhere, she ran into an old friend at a grocery store. They got to talking, and the friend mentioned she was moving abroad and needed to rent out her house quickly to someone she could trust. She described the house, and it was exactly, down to the smallest detail, what my student had been visualizing. Same neighborhood she'd been drawn to, same kind of garden. Even the light coming through the windows was exactly as she'd imagined. Here's the important part. That house had been sitting there the whole time. The friend had only just made the decision to move 2 weeks before they ran into each other. The universe had been arranging all the pieces, getting the friend's new job offer, orchestrating the timing of the move, making sure my student happened to need tomatoes that particular afternoon, so she'd be in that particular store at that particular moment. All of this was happening in the invisible while my student was faithfully holding to her vision. You see, the delay wasn't a denial. It was the universe getting everything perfectly aligned. This is why you must never judge by appearances. The three-dimensional world is always the last to show the change. By the time you see something in your outer world, it's already an accomplished fact in the inner world. When you're tempted to give up, that's when you need to dig in even deeper. Double down on your faith. Increase your affirmations. See your good as already accomplished. Feel the joy of it now, before it appears. Because here's what I've learned after all these years. The thing you're asking for is already done. It's already yours in the spiritual realm. Your job is simply to accept it, to remain in a state of expectancy and gratitude, until it manifests in form. So today, I'm going to give you a specific practice that has never failed me when I've used it correctly. I call it the practice of divine indifference. Now, be careful here, this isn't apathy. This isn't giving up. Divine indifference is actually the highest form of faith. When you're divinely indifferent, you care about the outcome, but you're not emotionally entangled in times when it comes. You've given your decree, you've spoken your word, and now you rest in the absolute certainty that it's done. You go about your business with joy and expectancy, but without that anxious checking, that desperate monitoring. Think of it this way. When you plant a seed in the ground, you don't dig it up every day to see if it's growing, do you? You water it, you give it sunlight, and you trust the process. You know that seed contains within itself everything it needs to become the full plant. Your job is simply to provide the right conditions and then let nature do what nature does. Your word is that seed. Once you've planted it in consciousness, once you've spoken it with conviction, your job is to provide the right conditions, faith, expectancy, gratitude, and then allow the divine process to unfold. The moment you start digging it up with doubt, the moment you start obsessively checking to see if it's working, you disturb the very process you're trying to activate. I remember a student who came to me absolutely frantic about money. She'd been affirming abundance for weeks, she said, but nothing was happening. I asked her to describe her days, and she told me that multiple times every day, she'd check her bank account. She'd look at her mailbox, hoping for unexpected checks. She'd search through her purse, hoping money had somehow appeared. She was in a constant state of monitoring and checking, and I said to her gently, "My dear, every time you check like that, you're really affirming the lack. You're sending out the vibration of, it's not here yet. You're actually canceling out your affirmative prayer with your anxious behavior." What she needed to do was to give her word and then walk away from it in due faith, to act as if it were already done. Not in a fake way, not pretending, but genuinely resting in the conviction that what she'd asked for was on its way. So she started a new practice. Every morning, she'd make her statement, "Infinite Spirit, open the way for my immediate supply. Let all that is mine by divine right now reach me in great avalanches of abundance." And then this was the crucial part: she'd go about her day as if the money were already deposited. She stopped checking her account. She stopped the anxious monitoring. She thanked God in advance for her supply. And within 2 weeks, she received an unexpected inheritance from a distant relative she barely remembered. The money came in an amount greater than what she'd been worrying about all those months. What changed? Not her circumstances, not initially anyway. What changed was her consciousness. She moved from anxious striving into divine indifference. She planted her seed and trusted the harvest, and in that divine indifference, she discovered something extraordinary. Answers began appearing everywhere. Not because she was desperately searching, but because she had created space for them to arrive. Someone mentioned a book in casual conversation that contained exactly what she needed to know. An old friend called out of the blue with an insight that shifted everything. She stumbled upon an article that seemed written specifically for her situation. Synchronicities multiplied. This is how the universe works when you stop blocking the flow with anxiety. The moment you release your grip, infinite intelligence can work through channels you never imagined. I've seen this happen so consistently that it's become predictable. The person who stops obsessing over their love life suddenly meets someone wonderful. The business owner who releases their desperate need for a specific client finds 3 better opportunities appearing. The artist who stops forcing their work discovers their most authentic expression, flowing effortlessly. The divine plan always exceeds your limited human expectations. Always. But here's what most people miss. Divine indifference doesn't mean you don't care about the outcome. It means you care more about alignment than attachment. You care more about divine timing than your own timeline. You care more about the perfect unfoldment than your specific picture of how it should look. You're saying to the universe, "I desire this or something better. I trust your infinite wisdom to deliver what serves my highest good." That or something better is crucial. It keeps the door open for miracles that exceed your imagination. It acknowledges that you can't see the whole chessboard from where you're standing, but infinite intelligence can. I remember a woman who was desperately trying to sell her house. She needed a specific amount of money by a specific date. The more she pushed, the fewer offers came. Then she practiced divine indifference. She affirmed, "This house sells easily and quickly to the perfect buyer," or "Something better happens for my highest good." 2 weeks later, she received an unexpected job offer in another city with a signing bonus that exceeded what she would have made from selling her house. The company even offered to handle selling her property as part of the relocation package. She got what she truly needed, financial security and a fresh start, but through a channel she never could have orchestrated with her limited human planning. This is the intelligence we're working with. This is the power that responds to your faith. So stop white-knuckling your desires. Stop checking and rechecking for signs of progress. Stop trying to force doors open that aren't meant for you. Stop manipulating and scheming and strategizing from a place of fear. Instead, plant your seed with absolute conviction. Speak your word with authority. See the invisible reality more clearly than the visible circumstances. Then rest in divine indifference, knowing that what is yours cannot be kept from you. Your harvest is inevitable. The timing is perfect, even when it doesn't match your schedule. The method is perfect, even when it doesn't match your plan. The outcome is perfect, even when it doesn't match your limited picture. Trust the process. Trust the pause. Trust the preparation happening behind the scenes. Your manifestation isn't late. It's right on time. And when it arrives, and it will arrive, you'll understand why it couldn't have happened any sooner. You'll see how every delay was divine protection, how every detour was divine direction, how every no was clearing the path for a bigger yes.